Welcome to How to Run a More Effective Choir Rehearsal. My name is Angela Westhoff-Johnson, and I'm thrilled to be spending the next hour with you as we talk about running choir rehearsals and the best way to enhance your choral program. Before we get started, for your best viewing, you should close other programs or applications as it will improve your viewing and sound quality. If you'd like to ask some questions, use the questions section on your control panel. You can type those in at any time, and then we'll give some time to the end, at the end of the webinar, to talk about those questions. I'd like to begin with a prayer from one of OCP's resources, Choir Prayers. There are 2 volumes, Choir Prayers and More Choir Prayers. This one's called Bless Us in Our Beginnings. Lord, we take our seats again as we begin to sing. We are well rested. Summer was filled with freedom and fun, freedom to worship whenever we wished on Sunday mornings, freedom to spend evenings for our own pleasure, no meetings, no rehearsals, just the good, sweet rest that summer is all about. But now it is over. We return. We know full well what we are in for, Lord, getting up from the dinner table and going out the door when we'd rather keep sitting, working up the mental energy to concentrate on new music when we'd rather unwind in front of the TV. So why do we come, Lord? It would be so easy to let someone else be part of the choir. In the end, it is simple. We are here because of a love of God, a love of His people, a love of music. It is a love that far surpasses the urge to choose an easier way. Lord, you have gifted us, called us to do your work in this vineyard of song. We have heard your invitation and have responded. Bless us in our beginnings, Lord. Give us the fortitude to remain faithful to your call. Help us to serve well. Choir Prayers, the resource Choir Prayers and More Choir Prayers is something I encourage you to use as you begin your rehearsals. They're geared directly toward music ministers. So now we'd like to take a poll on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5. 1 to 10 would be way too many choices for you. 1 to 10, 5, how proficient is your choir? 1 being low proficiency, 3 medium proficiency, 5 high proficiency. So just to give me a little idea of the groups, the choirs you're working with, where do you think your choir falls within that? Are they very, very, very beginners? That doesn't mean they're just new to your choir. Maybe they don't read music at all. Maybe your group has a few people who love to be there but are of low proficiency. High proficiency, they're good readers. They can do 4-part music pretty independently, maybe some with DVC, but pretty highly skilled. That will help. Okay, let's begin. Planning. I know I've said this before, written this in one of my cantate articles, but I am always looking for new pieces of music. You can't turn it off as a choir director. All summer long, I am planning. All year long, I'm planning. For example, you hear a piece and you've just passed the moment when it would be appropriate in your season. So I write it down. I often order music a year in advance, but I have to make a good note of that, for next year, end of September, this piece, I want to do this piece, and I already own it. There have been a couple times where I bought a piece of music twice, and boy, that's frustrating, huh? But plan all the time. be planning throughout the summer. Outline your year. In the beginning, it's a big outline, like fall, Advent, Christmas, Lent, Easter, spring, that kind of thing. And plug in new pieces that you want to do during those specific seasons or breakdowns of the year. 3 to 5 new pieces for each season is kind of where I start. I like to think that way, especially for the season of Advent. Maybe 3 is a stretch. Maybe 1 every new choral piece every Advent. I used to think 1 new choral piece each Sunday. My choir does 2 choral anthems or motets each Sunday. So 1 of which is new. 1 is a repeat from last year or the year before, or recycling out of the choral library. 50% new in the year. It's tough to come up with that much. I mean, for one reason is money. It's hard to buy that many new pieces of music if your choir is large. But recycling from even a few years earlier will feel like a new piece to many people in the choir. I always give the choir a list of the music for the season. That's really important. I do a breakdown Sunday by Sunday, which I'm going to show you here. That will tell you each Sunday the piece of music. For example, you'll see Ordinary Time 26. That was September 25th this past year. Sorry, moved to the wrong screen there. There we go. It shows the prelude that the organist will play, the opening song, that first piece there, You Gather in the Outcast by Scott Crandall. That was our preparation of the gifts. We always do a communion antiphon, communion piece there. We need 2 or 3 of them at the Cathedral. Ave Verum Corpus, the William Byrd motet, as a post-communion, as communion's ending. Sometimes there's a second collection, closing song, and the organ postlude. So I do this Sunday by Sunday, each Sunday of the year during the summer, so that when we start the season in September, I've got this already laid out. Now, there's subject to change, of course, but for the most part, I like to have every Sunday picked out. The other thing that I do give the choir is a list of dates, really important. You've got volunteers, you've got people who have lives and families and children, and it gets busy. So I like to give them a list sort of at a glance of what's happening. This way, they can plug things into their own calendar, and later they can't say, I didn't know anything about that date, right? We all know how that works. So subject to change, of course, but I like to put more dates in there so they can plan. Choir rehearsals, always create a rehearsal lineup and email that to the choir ahead of time. It's more for me than for them, but I start with sometimes 5 minutes before the choir rehearsal begins. I have a 2-hour choir rehearsal. Some people will shoot for an hour and a half. That would be challenging for me to get through the repertoire that we do in an hour and a half. So we do have a 2-hour choir rehearsal. We do not take a break. I have found that a break during a choir rehearsal is challenging to get them back into that sort of focused mode. There are enough breaks within the choir rehearsal where you might work with one section. Okay, sopranos, let's just go through that. The other voices get a chance to rest, and there's times for little jokes. I tend to say a few too many jokes. Sometimes it's hard to get them back focused, and that's always on me, not them. But the rehearsal lineup is really, really, really important. Another really good, and I'll show you maybe a rehearsal lineup in a second here, but another good thing is to have the room prepared. Don't be still preparing your rehearsal room when they come in. No choir member wants to see you kind of floundering at the very end before the rehearsal starts. So I have a large whiteboard in the room. I write every piece of music up there in the order in which they will happen, just like the lineup that was sent out to them. And they're expected to be there ahead of time and to get their rehearsal folder in order. Really important. Seating arrangement. While it can change depending on voices, it is nice for them to just know where they sit. Do sort of sectionals and voicing so you know which voices work better next to each other. Doesn't mean one singer's better than the other. It means voices work together. That's really, really important. Can totally change the sound of your choir, of your section. Take attendance. Have something where they can log in, sign in, check their name off that they were there. Sometimes they forget to do that, but it gets them in the habit when they walk in the room to check off their name. And perhaps the most important part of running an effective choir rehearsal is starting on time. If you don't start on time, they will not arrive on time. So I like to start a minute or two early with a warm-up so that when they walk in the room, their choir folder is in order, and they can expect that we're going to be efficient from the beginning. That way also, when people come in late, they come into music happening. And it does, the more you do that, the less likely you're going to do that. So begin on time. I talked about that rehearsal lineup. Here's the kind of thing that I send out to the choir, usually the beginning of the week, sometimes midweek, but it tells them minute by minute what's happening at that rehearsal. Having a folder in order, the music in order, really makes for a very efficient rehearsal. When people are digging through their folders, it adds time. So when people let me know they're going to be gone, I put that at the top of our rehearsal lineup just so I know, hey, we're not waiting for Mark to come. We can begin without him. We are fortunate to have a separate rehearsal room, a really large, lovely room. The sound is adequate. It works. It's not like rehearsing in the church, but it works. If we're stuck and there's something happening inside the church itself, we can rehearse in the choir room. I like to do maybe a new piece up there for the first time so they can better hear the notes and hear the piano maybe helping them play notes if needed. Moving in the middle of a choir rehearsal, like we do, we move over to the Cathedral, and that takes time. So I consider those little moments of break during the rehearsal, which is part of the reason why I don't take a full break in the middle of a rehearsal. So you'll just see sort of that minute by minute. I like to program things in most of the time 5 to 7 minute increments. You'll see that between 7:15 and 7:18 we do one song. We know that Sicut Cervus Palestrina very well, so we just need to refresh that in our mind. But take a look at 7:26, that piece, which is a really difficult piece, The Lamb. That asterisk means it was new in their choir box that night. So that hasn't been in their folder until that night. I might spend more time on that. You'll see that's like almost 10 minutes on that piece. But the pieces that we've rehearsed for a few weeks, we just run through them then at that time. Beginning with warm-ups. I do hear that question a lot. Help me find some vocal warm-ups. I absolutely understand and feel your pain coming up with new ideas for warming the choir up. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, and I'll give you a couple examples and resources to look at. Sight singing is one of the most important things you can do for building your choir's ability. So people say, I have a group of singers who can't read music. And I think, how long have you been working with that group of singers? 3 years? Well, then I have to put that on you. Why can't they still read music if you've been working with them for 3 years? or 5 years? Are you teaching them by rote? Are you playing the notes for them? And then that's how they learn that? You need to be the one to incorporate sight singing into very simple things. Give them a new piece of music, give them a pitch, maybe play the first interval or two, and then let them read that piece. They will stumble, and that's okay. Sight singing is difficult, but it's your job to get them to read music. As you're maybe teaching them by rote a piece, and maybe there's an interval of a fifth, then you need to point that out and say, that's a fifth, that's what that sounds like. Or here's a major triad. This is in a minor key. The time signature. If you don't talk about those things, how will they know those things? So that's on you as the director to teach them how to read music or to become more musically proficient. Use your time wisely in a rehearsal. As you remember from my rehearsal lineup there, sometimes 3 to 5 to 6, 7 minutes on a piece. If you spend too much time on a piece of music, they get bored and they will check out. So work on a piece of music for 4, 5, or 6 weeks in little increments. It keeps people more interested. And knowing your own music. I just said that's the most important thing. Well, maybe this is the most important thing. You have to know your music. You can't be learning the music along with your choir. And if you are, admit that. Say, hey, I just got this new piece of music. Let's read this together. But admit that. If you don't know the piece throughout, how can you properly teach them that piece of music? Like, know where the difficult spots are going to be. I can play through a piece of music and think, we're not going to keep this section in tune. So begin with that section, right? Or if something is rhythmically challenging, start there and have them speak that section over and over. Okay, maybe this one is the most important. Being positive and upbeat, because they are sharing and volunteering their evening with you. And if it's not a pleasant one, why would they come back? So being positive and having fun will get them to come back. Don't be falsely positive, because they can see through that, right? But be positive. Have fun. You're spending a lot of time together. It's family. Being in a choir becomes family. Oh, I know. I want to go back to that, because that woman in the choir singing that, the shape of her face, remember that. Maybe we'll see her a little bit later. I can't quite tell what vowel she's singing, right? Is it an ah? It's kind of an ah. It looks a little more like an ah to me. Shape of mouth and vowel unification is so very, very important. So I talk about that a lot. So remember what she looks like. Look at your choir members. I look at mine all the time. I'll say, what vowel are you singing? Your mouth isn't showing that you're singing that vowel. That looks like a wrong vowel to me. I don't mean to pick on that lady. She's not in my choir. So, but vowel shape is really, really important. Set high standards. Of course, you're setting high standards for where they are relative to their proficiency. But push them. Expect more of them. You can't do it the entire rehearsal or you will lose them. But you have to be encouraging and push them to the next level, or they will, and believe in them, or they will never reach for more. As important as beginning on time, ending your rehearsal on time is so important. I have been at the Cathedral for many years, 23 and a half or 4 years. I'm losing count. I don't know that I've ever gone past our time to end a rehearsal. If anything, I err on 5 minutes early or 7 minutes early maybe, knowing that fellowship and talking after a rehearsal is really important, and their time to get home is really important. So I like them to be getting in their car, out the door, by the time rehearsal is supposed to end. Another important thing is after your choir rehearsal, go back to your computer. The next morning, think about the rehearsal. What went well? What didn't go well? What do you need to work on next week that didn't go so well? That's planning for the next choir rehearsal. And if you rehearse on Wednesday or Thursday, I rehearse on Thursday nights, I plan for Sunday morning right away. That rehearsal is really important. You can get a lot done, which is why I don't have extra choir rehearsals. Around Christmas, have never had one of those. I think if we need an extra choir rehearsal, I'm not doing something correctly in the rehearsal. So think about your Sunday morning choir rehearsal. I always have a 1 hour call before the Mass starts. So our choir Mass is at 11, we gather at 10. By 10:30, we are done rehearsing the music for that morning, sometimes 10:20. That means the psalm, the communion antiphon. We usually don't rehearse the hymns, gathering and sing hymn. Sometimes go through the communion song. There's a rotation of about 15 communion songs, so they're in their repertoire. We don't usually have to go through those. Go through the 2 anthems for the day, as well as the communion antiphon. I think I said that. The psalm and the gospel acclamation are so important. That's the word, part of the liturgy of the word, proclaiming the word. Sometimes we don't remember how important that is. So that's what we warm up with that on Sunday mornings. We've been using Respond and Acclaim for many, many years, and it works well. We do it in 4 parts, add the descant. Sounds lovely. That's our warm-up. But I can also get 20 to 25 minutes of rehearsing future repertoire with the choir on Sunday morning. So that's an important time. I do want to remind you that you can ask questions as we go along. You can put those in at any time, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the webinar. So, warm-ups. It's one of those things that everybody's asking about. Help me find effective warm-ups. Well, you want to use warm-ups that they actually, elements in warm-ups that they will find in the music that you will be singing. So things like sustained singing, so they don't have to take a breath every few notes. They aren't properly using their breath and their support if they have to do that. Staccato and detached singing, boy, that forces a choir to sing with great support when there's repeated staccato notes. Diction, right? As I mentioned, as you're singing the psalm, work on diction. I mean, understanding the text is always important, particularly when you're proclaiming the word. So crisp diction, arpeggios, singing from one octave to the next with the major triad in between, really important. And descending, that same arpeggio descending, right? We lose pitch often as we descend. That's just human nature. So working on as you ascend, then descend, thinking you're still ascending. That really does help. I often am pointing my finger up to the sky as they're descending, so they just subliminally think, oh, keep that pitch high. So building a chord, having maybe divided basses, divided tenors, divided altos, divided sopranos, and you're thinking, I don't have enough singers to do that. If you have 2 singers in a section, you have enough singers to do this on a warm-up. Build a chord, have them sing that chord on an ah or a ma, beginning with an M is always great, and then have them sing up a half step, down a half step. That keeps a choir in tune. It keeps their ear working hard. Using solfege or chord tones is also very important. So, for example, on a whiteboard, or if you have a chalkboard or something like that, writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? So 1, 2, 3, pointing to that and sing those 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. Of course, when you're going stepwise, that's pretty easy. Eventually, having your choir being able to point and have them sing 1, 3, 5, 3, 1. So they're singing a major triad, that kind of thing. Those are great for kids as well. Do, re, mi, re, do. It's hard, but that's a lot of fun for them. Then they goof up and they laugh, but it's fun. Sometimes you want to do music when you're warming up, and you don't just want to use nonsense syllables. This is a resource called Sacred Rounds. At the top of the page there, it'll tell you the print edition and the digital edition if you'd like to look at it digitally. Sacred Rounds is a resource by Christopher Walker, who has so many years and valuable knowledge of working with choirs. I don't use these as rounds because rounds get messy, but I mean, sometimes you can. I just have them sing it straight through, right? So this particular exercise, if you'll look over on the side, this is the number 15 in that resource, and the M means it is of medium difficulty. Underneath each title, it will tell you the things it's working on. So arpeggios, you see the triads outlaid there, scales, falling fifths, which are really hard for choirs to kind of sing. My spirit rejoices. Sorry, it's early here. In God my Savior, who on his, so that kind of thing. Have them sing that. Have them, then if you wish to do them in a different system, so then have the sopranos start. First system, number 1. When they get to number 2, have the altos start that first system. When the altos get to have the tenor, you get it, and keep going that way. Rounds are a good way to make a choir feel like they're singing parts when they really aren't. Right? It sounds like choral singing, but really they're singing in unison, melody at different times. But it's a way to build toward choral singing. All right, a couple more examples. Out of the Depths. That one is a rising seventh and minor triads. That one's easy, or Mr. Walker thinks it's easy. Peace be with you, falling scales and a rising octave. Octaves are not as easy for people to sing as you might think. So focusing on the octave, that's great. Again, this resource is such a valuable resource, not terribly expensive. I wish I could tell you how much it is. I can't, but you can look online. I like this example very much. Singing in mixed meter can be, multiple time signatures can be difficult for a choir. I said earlier, have them speak the text. Completely valuable at any level of proficiency, right? So this goes between 6/8 and 2/4, which isn't a very challenging shift, but it might be for a beginning choir. So you would have them sing or say, praise God with sounding trumpets, praise God with lute and harp, praise God all you who have breath, sing praise to God, sing praise. Have them say that over and over again. Once they get the rhythm, finding the notes is not difficult. They've got the rhythm and the text in their mouths. So don't be afraid to have your choir say something in time throughout choir rehearsal, different moments. Have them do that. I mentioned that we begin each Sunday with chant. That can be your warm-up. Sometimes Sunday mornings you're stressed for time. You don't want to spend time on a choral warm-up they aren't going to use in Mass. So use that time as they're preparing for the liturgy to use something they're going to actually sing in the liturgy. If you are building your choir's proficiency, you might consider this. Each week, have one section. Maybe you don't have a 4 sections of your choir yet. So have the women come in early one week or the men come in early and work. It's always easier to work on kind of specific choral things when it's a smaller group. sometimes they feel less intimidated to make mistakes if it's just a few of them. Work on vocal production. It's kind of like giving a voice lesson. Note shed. Teach them the notes if they don't know them, but don't teach them every note, right? You want them to become more musically proficient. But each week, half an hour maybe, we have sectionals quite often where the altos will come in, or the first sopranos, a lot of divided music, and they want that kind of perfect vowel sound or unification of sound. So they'll just come in for a half hour or an hour. It's really valuable time for your choir to spend. So knowing your limits. How many people is too many people to bring into your choir each year? And I know some of you are thinking, are you kidding me? I'll take anyone I can get. I know that feeling too. When I started at the Cathedral many years ago, it was very small and not proficient at all. I knew I wasn't in for the long haul there because I couldn't commit myself to being excited every week and okay with the sound they were making. So I took about anyone I could. As long as they were there, I would take them. And I worked with them. It's a lot of work. But how many is too many? This past year, I accepted too many new people in the choir. There were 6 or 7. It was difficult. At the level at which the choir is, they have a repertoire. Every choir has a repertoire of music they know, and they can sing from the heart and feel completely comfortable. And then you bring 6 or 7 new people in who don't know that music, and it becomes overwhelming. Overwhelming for the new people and challenging for the seasoned choir members. So how do you do that? How do you balance that? How many is too many? It's a challenge. Don't be afraid to ask new members to just listen on a couple of pieces. We know this piece really well. We're not going to spend a lot of rehearsal time on this. So can you just listen on this one? Close your eyes as we sing this and imagine you singing it, but let us take this one. That will keep your seasoned choir members feeling valued, and they will feel like they can make music together on a piece that they know really well. When you do bring in new choir members, check in with them often. Provide feedback to them. Like, I noticed you're struggling on such and such. How are you doing? Are you feeling overwhelmed? I like to check in with people once a month, every few weeks, just to see how they're doing, or just make it really informal. Hey, I really appreciate you being there. I know how hard it is. But hang in there. It takes about 3 years to feel completely comfortable. But how you praise the longtime loyal, seasoned choir members is really important as well. Drop little notes to them. Encourage them to continue attending choir rehearsal even when it feels like we're going through a lot of music they already know. You might give a member a solo every once in a while, or say, hey, I'd like to do this intimate choral motet with just a small group. Will you sing in that group? That gives them the feeling of appreciation and value in the group. Introducing new choir music. Boy, don't underestimate how important this is. I like to do this at least 5, 6, sometimes months early. In the spring, we always, after Easter, when you've got that period of time that you kind of don't want them to fall off. That happens very easily. They get through Easter and they think, we're done. No, we're not done, because now we're going to focus on some new pieces yet for that season, but for the fall, for Advent. So introduce music in the spring that they're going to do in the fall. And then when you come back in the fall and start that piece again, it kind of feels familiar and they're like, this isn't so bad. But there are pieces that I find over the summer that I want to use at least 4 to 5 weeks early, at least. Don't shortchange your choir and have them feel uncomfortable singing a piece in the liturgy that they just haven't had enough rehearsal time. So when I introduce a new piece of music, I like to sing it straight through, one time through. Give them the idea of the shape of the piece, how long it is, that kind of thing. Let them fall apart. It's okay. It's tough to not stop them, but let them fall apart. Sometimes the sections that I think will be difficult seem accessible for them. Then determine what sections need the most work. Focus on just those sections. Each rehearsal, you don't have to do a whole piece. A lot of times I will start with the end of a piece. And there's a method to that. Begin there and work on the last half or the last third, especially when it's a repeated part earlier in a piece. So a piece of music that we'll look at in a minute might be the form of the music is A, B, A, meaning the first section is repeated at the end. And if you start with the end, then when you go back and work through a piece of music, they get to the end and they think, we know this. We know the rest of it. Or once they know the end, and then you begin the piece, and it's the same as the end, they feel comfortable. Right away, you've already built their sort of confidence in that piece of music. We'll look at a piece in a second that does just that. And how many new pieces for each season? So you've got Advent and Christmas. Advent's short, 4 weeks, and Christmas is right there. Lent, longer season, right? And Easter is a very long season. So sometimes it's best to have a piece for Easter Sunday and then do a few repeats in there. Easter season is long, so get a few pieces toward the end of the Easter season. You've got that time between Easter Sunday and the fourth Sunday of Easter to work on something. So a couple of pieces per season. Maybe you can only do one piece per season. That's okay, because then the next year you add another one. And within 4 or 5 years, look at the choral library and the repertoire that you have instilled in them. It's very valuable. So let's look at this piece of music. Peace I Leave With You. It's a new-ish piece by Robert Farrell. This was actually on our NPM showcase this past year. If you were there, thank you for being there and singing with us on our showcase. If you weren't there, you'll love this piece of music. You see the beginning, that's an A section. Peace I leave with you, I leave with you, I leave with you. Okay, so that A. As we go on to the next couple of pages, you'll see that's a B section right there. It's slightly different. Peace, it begins the same, I leave with you. Then the men, peace I leave with you. That middle section, different music. We're calling that B. And then you go back in to the A section, about measure 39. And to the end, it's almost identical as the beginning. A slight difference in the ending, but for the most part, A and A are the same with a little variation. So there's really 2 sections of this piece that need to be learned. If you approach learning new music that way, it will never feel so overwhelming. Find sections that are similar, focus on those, then when you go back to them, the choir knows them. They're confident. They feel good. So a piece I would love for you to look at for Christmas is called Verbum Caro. So many things I like about this piece. It's a strophic little hymn. It's in Latin, and it's accessible Latin. It's not difficult. So 3 verses, 4 parts, but really accessible parts. So if you have 8 people in your choir, you can do this. You might have a small group sing one verse. Of course, if you have 8 people, a small group is half of them, right? But be creative with that. Somehow mix it up a little bit. It's really, really lovely. Look at the different dynamics. It starts piano, mezzo forte, ends with the second verse, ends on piano again. Very accessible. Wonderful for the Christmas season and actually any time of the year. Shepherding Their Sheep, another really sweet little Christmas carol. I didn't know it before we published this piece years ago, and I think we've used it every Christmas Eve for the past, 7 or 8 years. It's sweet. That's the best way to say it. The ladies take verse 2, the men take verse 3, but it's only 8 measures. That's the great part, right? The whole piece is only a couple minutes in length. I love that text. Hi-dum, fiddly-dum. It means nothing. It just is kind of nonsense syllables that Christmas carols often have. Hi-dum. Maybe it means something. I don't think it does. If someone can find that out, let me know. But I don't believe it does. It's arranged by Richard Hillert, a very well-known composer who did This Is the Feast, the Festival Canticle for Easter Sunday and the Easter season. Do look at that if you're looking for a sweet little addition to your Christmas season. This is the sort of planning that I'm saying. You find these pieces in the summer. This piece, Lord, We Adore You, this is actually in Breaking Bread, just a unison assembly edition. The choral parts are stunning for this simple little adoration of the cross, veneration of the cross, little mantra that can be done over and over and over. Do it in unison a couple of times. If you don't have a sopranos who can sing that Latin descant, that's pretty high, you might have a solo instrument do that. We end the adoration of the cross with this. So we may do a choral anthem during the actual procession to the cross, and then end with this and do it over and over for a couple of minutes. It's really, really beautiful and very accessible. Going back to Christmas here, the Lisbon Carol, again, very accessible. I really like this piece of music. If you look at all of the rhythmic, constant rhythmic pattern happening in the piano part, gotta have a pretty decent pianist for this one, by Luke Meyernick, very, very skilled composer. 5 verses, so you can make this last. What I love is Latin refrain. Gaudete, gaudete, Christus es natus ex Maria, gaudete. Very simple Latin. There are 2 parts on the verses. You can have it done in unison, or you could have women do a few verses and have men, tenors and basses, take those same parts. But this is a real fun, it has lots of excitement in it with all the text, so can work on great diction through this piece of music. All right, now we get to the time where we can talk about answer some questions and see if you have some specific things to ask. We've got a couple people here helping me.
Yes. Hey, Angela, that was great. It's as a member of your choir, that's a lot. Now I see why our choir runs so well, and we get to sing all that great music.
I didn't plant him here for that reason, but Daniel does. Daniel, part of our marketing team, is in the Cathedral choir, does a great job in the tenor section, so he's here to ask some questions.
Yeah, so one person is asking, can you give an example of how to voice the choir to make voices work together better?
Yeah. Well, it's tough to give an example of that unless you have the singers actually here. Have your tenor section come in. Have them sing, how many you have. I have 6 really great, is it 6 or 7? I don't know, really great tenors. So I'm really fortunate. Tenors was maybe not the right section to use. How about we say sopranos? So sopranos come in, have them sing through a phrase. Move people around, have them sing through the same phrase. Close your eyes as they sing and listen for things like vowels or color. So when we talk about color for the voice, bright, dark, covered, spread, those kind of things to look for. What we ideally want is something in the middle of all those things. A dark sound is never great in a choir. You might have one person who has a bit darker tone that a brighter voice can balance, but too bright doesn't work. Too dark, it doesn't work. Ideally, you want them to be unified, and so certain voices work better, maybe a darker voice next to a brighter voice. That works because they balance each other out. I grew up in Iowa and lived in Iowa until I came out to go to graduate school out here, and if all of you Midwesterners know that we sometimes spread our spoken vowels, right? We can't sing the way we speak necessarily. Sometimes we want that. Say the phrase, say it, but boy, Midwesterners can't always do that because we spread our vowels, but we don't want that in choral singing. And some of the best choirs come out of the Midwest. Beautiful choral sounds, but ideally a taller, longer vowel works best. So ah, I always say to the choir, how many different ways can we say ah? Well, I'm still counting the ways. There are so many. Ah, ugh. So you don't want that. So ideally, ah, tall vowel, but be creative with how you listen to and move people around. Again, it never means one voice is better than the other. They just work better together.
Another question is, can you recommend a resource that would help the choir read music better? Is there anything you can think of for beginning singers?
Wow. There are some basic pedagogy reading books that, the basics of singing. Boy, I'm going back to my college days. Google that, the basics of singing, because I believe that, and I can see the front of it, but I can't right now think of the author of that book. OCP does not publish a book for basic reading, but I still think, for example, if you have choral praise, take out your choral praise, have them sing a piece they do not know, unison, no parts. Use that to point out different intervals and things like that. The more they do it, the better they get. But I know there's a book, a resource called The Basics of Singing. Look that up.
We've got a few more questions, but before I ask the next questions, I know there was a glitch in the audio at one point, so just to let everyone know, we'll have the full recording tomorrow with the proper audio. So if you missed a part that you really wanted to hear, it'll be available tomorrow. This one asks, do you have any advice for choirs making them comfortable with a cappella singing?
Well, it really does take time to feel confident to be able to sing without any accompaniment or support. There's nothing wrong with lightly accompanying something on an organ or on the piano. Sometimes piano is a little more noticeable. It's a percussive instrument, but you might have your organist sort of play more chords and not support every note singing. The only way to get better at doing it is doing it, right? A cappella singing is more effective for many reasons if you sit in a mixed formation. Now that's always scary to choirs initially, but how can you tune with the basses if the bass, you can't hear them? So ideally if you sit in a mixed formation, sitting next to someone other than another person in your part. It will help you become more confident. So spend a lot of time in rehearsal doing that. You might not do it in Mass yet, and it depends on your space. How is the acoustic in your church? Move around in the church. If it's better to sing around the baptismal font, rehearse around the baptismal font. We rarely rehearse where we stand, which can be frustrating sometimes to the singers, but rehearse in the best acoustical space in your church.
How long should I spend on warm-ups with my choir?
Well, it's different at different points of their proficiency. So I like people to come in maybe having warmed up. You can warm up in the car. Do little things like, ooh. It doesn't have to be, and that probably sounded really weird, but little things to get the voice warmed up. I like to begin my choir rehearsal with things that are not as taxing. So that's, I'm doing that intentionally because those are pieces that can continue to warm up on. But actual vocalizing and warming up, 2 to 3 minutes, you will lose them. They will become bored if you spend too much time. So use your repertoire to continue their warming up.
This question, I've actually often wondered in your choir, how do you plan the lineup and the timing of each song when you don't know how much time you're going to spend on the song?
And you know, Daniel can attest to this. So many times I look and I think, and I'll say it, I am right on time. I am not 1 minute behind. You just know. It's something that just gets easier as you go. You begin by spending a little more time on the piece, 7 minutes on that piece. Next week you only need maybe 5 or 6 minutes on the piece. So you but I create the lineup based more on variety of music. Never put 3 pieces next to each other that are really challenging. It's too difficult on the voice, on their attention, and they just lose interest, right? And so one piece might be a slower piece from the Renaissance period, that Sicut Cervus of Palestrina. The next piece might be something very light and bright and easier for them. So difficult, easier. Sustained, rhythmic, that kind of thing. Create that balance that way. But then you just know. And because we do a piece for 5 or 6 straight weeks, by the end, I need 3 minutes on it just to run it and maybe talk through one section. But you'll get there if you create that lineup and throughout your rehearsal, keep checking it. And then the next week you'll get better at it.
This person asks, how do you recruit male singers?
Well, that's tough. I can only go back to my beginning days at the Cathedral, and it was just a few people. I started in August of 1993, I think it was, and we sang the first time Advent, the first Sunday of Advent. So yeah, we rehearsed every week, but they didn't sing yet because they just weren't ready to sing yet. And so how do you recruit those people? As you are in Mass, as you are cantering, or as you have people out there in the congregation and you hear someone, be very sweet about it, but go up to someone and say, wow, you sing really well. Have you thought about joining the choir? Also, put it in your announcements. We are really looking for male singers. Or be present at the end of Mass as people are leaving. Greet people. Be friendly. Get to know your parishioners. Get the word out there. So nothing like an announcement that you actually get up to the ambo and say, hey, we would love you to join the choir. So, and choir members can also help with that too. The other thing is, I always say you have to look like you're having fun for someone to want to join a choir. Why would anyone want to join a group of people who look miserable? So you have to have fun, you have to give a balance of music, smile, people will join.
In the church, there's so many different people, and this person has a question about having lots of different people, a lot of different demographics. How do you get them to kind of come together as a choir, being punctual, singing in unison, that sort of thing, not always singing at full voice, and all those kind of differences?
Yeah. So there's always a wide variety of ages, or that's one of the questions I get asked a lot. The aging voice, which, let me tell you, that's a whole workshop in itself, right? Maybe because I'm getting old. We're all getting older every day, but the older I get, the more I think, someone needs to talk more about the aging voice, because choirs are made up of people often that are retired or are older because their life better works for the commitment. So what about when you have young people and you have older people? I don't want to say old people because I am one of those people now, right? So different voice types, people who sing out really loud all the time, despite the piano marking in the music, or people who are really timid and don't sing out as much. It's difficult. That is where you sometimes have the private conversation. Eye contact is great because you may be talking to the choir as a whole and looking at one person. I never want to single someone out at a choir rehearsal. Even when people say, I'm fine with it, you can totally point to let me know. No, you're not. You're not, because you will later say, I was completely offended. So don't single people out in front of a whole group, but make good eye contact when you're saying things like, that's marked piano. Can we sing with a lighter tone? And then if you still have to have the individual conversation, do that privately.
Okay, similarly, how do you get individuals to stop talking during a rehearsal?
Well, I have to say I'm sometimes the culprit, because I think, okay, let's get focused, and then they're really focused, and then I crack a joke or it leads me to something else, and I think I totally derailed the choir rehearsal. But it's important to have those periods of laughter and people to feel comfortable to say things, and then it's important to get them focused. It can be challenging. Other people in the choir can sometimes help with that. I believe at our rehearsal the other night, I was trying to focus on something, and the ladies were all just chatting, I think, about music, which is great, but about a section in the music. And it was one of the bases that said, hey, come on, guys, we have to focus, because wasting time, anyone's time, never feels good. So sometimes saying nothing is the best, right? You're trying to get their attention and you don't say a word, and things get quiet pretty quickly.
Okay, this person asks, why do choirs take a break during the summer months?
My gosh.
Shouldn't we always sing the Mass?
Absolutely, we should always sing the Mass. I believe that the choir break is one of the most important things you do for your choir. It puts a little more focus on assembly singing. Yeah, people should be singing in the assembly, and we sing all year long. Cantors or small groups can do that, but it's a huge commitment for a choir to give weekly rehearsals, Sundays, extra masses, travel time to and from. It's 6 to 8 hours a week of their time. Everyone needs time to spend with family, to visit other parishes, to go on retreat, to go to workshops. All of those things are very, very important. And when a group of musicians, a choir, is missed by an assembly, boy, you come back and everyone is excited. So yeah, we do always sing the Mass, but it's important to recognize the huge commitment and the break that people need.
Well, we do have a few other questions, but our time is up, so.
Thank you so much for being here with me this morning and for spending this time together. It's such an important ministry that we all do. So don't hesitate to ask questions and contact us for more information. You'll see that number and email information right there. You can always go back and look at webinars. And OCP is so committed to providing these valuable webinars. We have another one in just a few weeks on November 17th. Encuentro, Hopes and Challenges of Hispanic Ministry. Again, thank you very much for being with us and for all that you do to make music ministry so important in your parish. God bless.